international school, I'm surrounded by many teenagers who are driven enough to change their environments or their own home countries. At the same time, we are being pressured to change the world. However, not many people realize that this world is somewhat intimidating in our eyes. A year ago, I came to Japan and I faced many struggles and I learned many lessons along the way. At the same time, I started to explore the history of many other countries through the stories that my friends told me. Through this process, I started to make connections between my struggles and the history of these nations. By finding these patterns, I realized that the lessons we acquire from daily struggles can help us understand how the world works, and hopefully to make it a little bit less intimidating. This is because it is not nations or institutions who make the decisions, but it is in the very core humans who decide to declare war on one another or to make a big economic leap. One of the stories that have moved me the most is how Japan could overcome big sorrow after the end of World War II. After I could understand the dynamics of this event, I came up with the first lesson of today. Being the underdog can be your greatest advantage. So Japan had a dream. Japan wanted to provide a better future for their children, but they could not rely on natural resources or oil because they were scarce all around Japan. Instead, Japan had to rely on innovation and education to make better products at a faster rate than anyone else in the world. This decision eventually led Japan to become one of the wealthiest nations in the world and to go through what some people call an economic miracle. Japan proved the whole world wrong. The reason why this story appeals to me so much is because I could relate the history of Japan with my own struggles in my new international school. So it just took me one day to realize how behind I was academically. I went to the classroom, I sat down and looked at the teacher, and I swear I wanted to grasp as much knowledge as possible. However, as soon as the teacher opened his mouth, it all sounded like a tongue twister for me. Or even when my friend said something a little bit faster than usual, it all sounded like a riddle for me. Eventually, I started to become afraid and I started to panic. I thought that I would be dragging myself down from class to class, not understanding a single word of English. I had just come half across the world from my hometown, Mexico, to come to my dream school in Japan. So I had many ambitions for myself, and I wanted to become one of the best students in my class. So I had two options. One, to continue what I've been doing so far, or to do something different, something that not many people would be willing to do. So I chose to wake up every day at 5 a.m. to study all the subjects I was failing. Also, I decided to not go off campus more than once a month. Sure, it was a very tough decision, but totally worth it. My final marks report said that I just aced all the subjects I was failing. Through these stories, I learned that being the underdog leads you to unexpected paths to achieve success. Being against the wall leaves you no more option but to look to other ways to achieve your goals faster than you would ever imagine. Another lesson that I can relate with my struggles and the history of Mexico is the stories we repeat to ourselves can define who we become. In Mexico, there's a very popular quote that millions of Mexicans, especially young people, repeat to themselves day in and day out. Actually, my grade 9 history teacher said it very clearly in one of his classes. He said, "México es un país perdedor." In other words, boys, Mexico is a losing country. The thing is, he was referring to historical battles against other nations, but if you look at different battles or different issues, the ending is exactly the same. If you look at the battle of Mexico against corruption, economic stagnation, inequality, the ending is always the same. Mexico loses. This is how a single story can affect the lives of millions. This is because if you go to Mexico, many young people repeating this story will find themselves hopeless for a better future. They will stop trying to achieve a better life. We simply stop trying. We don't see anymore beyond our difficulties. A more positive story of how this point holds true in our personal lives is how my friends and I got a very good deal in a business trip. So a couple of friends and I went on a business trip to pitch one of our business ideas to some token tycoons. We perfectly knew we were amateurs, but we prepared our slides and pitched as if we were legit business people. We even made some really cool and fancy roles for our new company. One of my friends was the CEO, another of my friends was the head of the design department, and I was the chief product officer. How cute. It might sound nuts, but we actually managed to get 9 meetings on that week. And we got a mentor for ourselves to complete our dreams, to make our goals a reality. If we had made ourselves believe that we were just a bunch of kids without experience, we would have acted as if the amateurs we were, right? We would have lost self-confidence. Instead, we chose to believe that our idea was worth it, right? So this is how stories can impact our lives, and how repeating yourself these stories can define your reality. They can predict your successes and failures. Another lesson that I could relate with my with the life in Mexico and my own struggles is complacency is the #1 enemy of growth. In Mexico, there's a very famous quote to describe our national soccer team. Jugaron como nunca y perdieron como siempre. They played as never and they lost as always. Imagine this, the last World Cup, Mexico's first match was against Germany, and Germany was the previous world champion. And we won that match. It was big news in Mexico. You know, you might think piñata, tequila, right? And in reality, it was a miracle in Mexico's history, if you want to think it about that way. But then 2 matches passed by, and the 4th match came in. So Mexico went to the court. The Mexican team did his thing, and they scored a goal, and then everyone in Mexico was, goal! But before you noticed, the other team had already scored a goal, and another goal, and another goal, and the match was over. Mexico lost. You might call it bad luck or lack of preparation. But this has been the same pattern that we followed for the last 50 years. We've always been kicked out in the 4th match. We call it a course in the Mexican soccer universe, right? So Mexico has had to pay the cost of complacency over and over again. And in a personal level, we see that the more successful we become, the more confident we become with ourselves. And the moment you start not doing what took you to the top of your game, you will start sliding down slowly to failure. But what can we learn from all these comparisons between the individual scale and the big, massive scale? Well, we all know that different morals can be told through different stories. But also they can be told in different scales, right? So just take a step back and pay attention to the personal struggles that can give you lessons, because they can provide a glance of how the world works. And they can tell you how to overcome challenges bigger than yourself, and we can become more confident to finally do what it takes to change the world. Thank you.